On Sunday, July the 3rd, 2022, I have posted number 3,648 to the Anachronisms blog. Anachronisms with the ZMS.blogspot.com is where you can find it. This one's called Some of the Members of My Family. Some of the members of my family are trees, with an epigraph by and inspiration from Julien Poirier from the poem Berkeley Voice Notes. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing Julian's name. I should know better. Which is in the nicely named book out of print. On my walk, there is a palm tree, furred feral and sort of senile. Those are the first two lines of the poem. And it goes on. Sort of cute and lonely, like a desert wallflower. And I then want to tell you what the mysterious next couplet says, and then tell what comes next. The awesome continuation of the story that is the poem, or at least it's a solid narrative thus far, which is a stunning and lovely, long, singular line stanza, which, if you're following, was preceded by 3 couplets, which you'd have seen if you could see what I was reading. However, didn't I start by talking about my sisters, my uncles, and my cousins, the trees? Then why not first thought, best thought? That's the first thing that shot into my head after reading this poem's first couplet. I'm embarrassed to tell you that this occurred with Seth Meyers conducting a late-night interview in my ear. And gosh, should I even mention that Stephen Colbert is in my ear at the moment? But Meyers was interviewing Senator Elizabeth Warren. And good grief, Colbert is speaking now with Ibrahim X. Kendi, who is saying, in answer to a question Colbert just asked this historian and leading anti-racist scholar and author of 2 new books, which are entitled How to Raise an Anti-Racist and Goodnight Racism. Kendi is saying this. Quote, so let's just talk about slavery. If we teach white kids about slavery, we're going to teach them that there were white people who enslaved people and there were black people who were enslaved. And we're also going to teach them that there were white people and black people who challenged and fought against slavery. And so my question back to them, brackets, people who take issue with history being taught, as it were, would be, why can't we allow white children to identify with white abolitionists? And why aren't they concerned about how black kids feel when they're not represented in the curriculum? So who are we? Who am I? And how can we ever know? I mean, at least those of us who aren't driven to question things, who aren't taught to question every single thing. Who am I? Well, for starters, I'm an American who just turned 55 years old. This seems like a fact, at least at the moment, that is solid, one that I can wrap my hands around, hands and head around. And so now I'm reflecting on what was said back on the other channel just a few minutes ago when I began writing the poem about the arboreal members of my kith and kin, or actually just my arboreal kinfolk. Let's save kith for another time, shall we? For, say, a relevant time and a relevant place, for a related place, that is, a place and time with which there is relation to the one that is happening now. So we might just call it a relative of this time and place. Quote, the opinion has nothing about the human impact of what it means to take away the decision that a woman makes about continuing a pregnancy, unquote, says Senator Warren. Most of what would be any semblance of legal justification comes from bizarre 17th century when, quote, oh, I'm sorry, a time when aristocrats ran the world, when the only people who had voices were white men, and when slavery was a way for people to make money, she says. What the ruling does, she goes on, is to insert instead the government, my italics, to come in callously and make the decision instead of the person who is pregnant. While I would call this poetry here, what I am telling you, please allow me to go ahead and metaphorically hit you over the head with a metaphorical baseball bat here and suggest that she's giving us a poetic hint that what's really going on here is that somebody is getting more than just metaphorically fucked by some other body by way of this governmental insertion. Governmental insertion. Or governmental insertion. I think she used that phrase. Or, let's be a bit more real, whatever real might mean. More on this in a bit. A whole lot of bodies are about to line up and get fucked by what now is clearly one seriously fucked up body. ... Realizing that the trend here is to deprogram, or for history not to be taught these days, might I, in the process of re-educating myself, regurgitate for you a bit of the no-no that is our collective history. The Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe versus Wade was made by their predecessors, which we could take the liberty, now there's a nice, well-intentioned word for you, of calling them their scrotal grandparents. In 1973, when the court, capital C, ruled that the Constitution, capital C, in the capital, capital C, of the capitals U, S, and A, generally protects the liberty to have an abortion, in other words, for 90% of my lifetime, which is the part of it, much of which I actually remember. This general protection has been the law of the land, a right which was fought for and for which many gave their lives. By which I mean gave their adult, awake, human lives. Now is when the question might as well go from who am I to do I even exist? Whether by that last question I mean for all practical purposes, or effectually, or essentially, or seriously, or dead serious. I'm asking you for real here. Do I even exist? Which would therefore mean literally, or in actuality, do I have existence? Voices, poetry, trees, a poet's trees, the news, by way of late night talk shows, the new news, which isn't good news, old news. Who am I? Who are we? History, herstory, really, reality, science, the erasure of each of these things. Sandra Bernhard, without you I'm nothing. So I appreciate your patience with my meanderings, that they might in some way say something to you, because I believe in you, and I believe in me. And this is what I do. I believed, I wrote, and I imagined these senile, fuzzy, feral-looking, cute, austere, and devastatingly lonely palm trees, thanks to a few nice words written in a book made of paper, which trees make me think of my family on this eve of July 4th here across the bay from Berkeley, and the land in which I've lived, now all by myself for over half a dozen years, and yet amongst my people, and by my people, I also mean the trees, which include, yes, palms and eucalypti, which are no doubt more kith than kin, unless there's something I haven't been made aware of with regard to my history, with regard to my heredity, which, as my dad used to say, in language I shall not repeat here, is certainly a possibility. For 22 of my 55 years, which is 40% of my life, at the moment, mathematically, and math, I might add, is generally a science, like all the rest of the sciences for that matter, that I can solidly, the root word of which, solid, I notice that I keep using here, get behind. And scientifically speaking, we're all, as human people, slightly related to trees, being alive and all. So what does any of this have to do with anything? Or can't I just say it's a summary of what's on my mind, what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, of hearsay, of truth, of existence or non-existence? I can say that, but what do I really know? What do any of us really know? Who are we? Who are you? Who am I? Let's get it together, people, because I believe in you and me that we can do better. And for starters, we can do better by questioning everything, by boning up on history, and by figuring out who the heck we are. But alas, that's just what I think. The bigger question seems to me to be, what do you think? And bigger still, what are you going to do about it? I do most humbly inquire, what, my kith, my country, my family, 'tis of thee